Olive Huang, thank you so much for being here for our Doing Business in Asia video series. Now, look, just to give our viewers and listeners a bit of a background on you, if I may. So you're Vice President of Market Strategy at this moment in time at Salesforce, formerly Product Strategy. You are CRM and Customer Experience Industry Thought Leader. And I know you as such, as a very seasoned and experienced and very influential public speaker. As I mentioned, an ex-Gartner analyst in that field as well. But if we now focus on Asia, I know that their main office hubs in Singapore, in China, in India, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. So even if we only look at that part of it, this is a very impressive portfolio in terms of diversity, isn't it? And again, your portfolio, your role is really global. But APAC seems to be contributing to about 10% of the total revenue. So it's really, really quite important, isn't it? And your background also covers other positions where I believe that at Atos and at Siemens, for example, where you were Vice President, Asia, Australia, and Middle East, you had also that deep dive. I'd love us to know a little bit more about what your experience is, your own experience across APAC when it comes to customer profiles, the diversity of customers that you see in particular across Asia.
Yeah, very good question. Right? So I am Chinese-born, China-born, Beijing-born, Chinese, lived in Singapore for a decade, traveled around Asia, moved to Australia, went to farming industry, and then now live in Cairns and working for American software company, right? So I am a example of what Asia is or Asia Pacific is, right? So when anybody asks a question, says, what's your advice to people who wants to develop a customer experience strategy for Asia Pacific region? I said, well, you can't. It's really about where, right? So it's really about where in Asia, and particularly, because of COVID and because of geopolitical tensions, changes, because of the digital transformation that Asia is going through, which when you look at the, for example, digital commerce ecosystem in different part of Asia, you really can't develop one strategy, right? So I use this story always to my San Francisco colleagues. I said, look, we need to become a company which is internationally competitive. And then they said, what does it mean? I said, this is what it means. So if you go to an intercontinental hotel in Singapore and you go to that international breakfast buffet, and what do you see? You'll see a big hall, and then you'll see bacon and eggs. You'll see three types of Chinese. You'll see Indians and Indian vegetarians, Malaysian halals and Middle Eastern halals, and koshers for Jewish communities, and vegetarians for Chinese, Buddhism, and everything else, right? So you have Japanese and Koreans, and so every culture represents a station that you'll say, this is my breakfast. That's called international buffet. If you go to the Intercontinental Hotel in San Francisco and you say international buffet, and then you walk into the hall, there's a bacon, eggs, and orange juice and baked beans, and repeat bacon, egg, orange juice, and baked beans. And then there's one corner have a pot of chicken porridge called Asian. So that's a lot of international companies' perception about Asia Pacific. So you say, well, and then you can't really change that, because when you look at software companies, right, so 9 out of 10 successful ones are from America, and that's what it is. There are lots of people who are very worldly, but not the majority of when you walk into the country, the economy is so strong, it's self-centered and self-absorbed and interpret the word in a very funny way to people like us. So the key about being successful, let's say, for example, creating a successful customer experience strategy in Asia Pacific is really to understand the locality about it, and to go into that granularity of breaking it down into segments and breaking it down into countries. And you don't need to do too much. You just need to do slightly better than your competitor. And that's going to be enough, right? So the things start to change when Asia starts to get very advanced digitally, right? So I just read a research delivered by Google, Temasek and Bain and company, right? So they look at the Southeast Asia's digital commerce change over the past year. They say, well, within the past 12 months, Southeast Asia added 40 million new internet users within 1 year, right? So in 2020, and then to put the number into comparative, between 2015 and 2019, there is 100 million increase. So it just jumped up, right? So, and today more than 70% of region's population is online, and then you will see that COVID has led to an acceleration of digital consumptions. And more than 1 in 3, every 3 digital service consumers started using service due to COVID-19, right? So people who are the most stubborn, reluctant offline users start to go online, and that's Southeast Asia. And then you really going into what happened in Singapore, what happened in Malaysia, what happened in Indonesia. Without doing that, we can't become successful, right? So and then to create what is right for that breakfast for that country.
Absolutely, yeah. But the way in which you nuance this, saying make sure you're slightly better than the competition.
That's right.
Very, very interesting point. Absolutely. So, given the current context, what do you see, or what have you seen most recently in terms of business transformation?
Yeah, I focus more on service, right? So customer service. My heart, if you look at what I have been doing for Gartner, is the deepest part of my knowledge is really on customer service transformation. So what I've seen that companies are moving ahead from trying to save costs, right? So cost saving, to really cost optimization, which means they move people from phone-based services or face-to-face to really smart self-service and digital services, much cheaper channels, much faster to get the job done. And then towards I call it cost optimization, which means really goes into digitally optimize their business model, right? So I was reading a few articles about AirAsia, right? So you can, to our audience, lots of information publicly available, right? So just Google AirAsia digital transformation. They literally speeded up a 5 years digital transformation plan into 1 year, because all of a sudden people are not flying, so they started, I think, if I remember it right, so more than 15 additional line of business related to local services, and becoming their vision is becoming the next Asia's super app, right? So like a Grab. So not saying they have to be successful. It is a hard journey, but the courage, right? So the bravery of leading this transformation is some I think it will go down in the history or in the MBA textbook, right? So because of this change,
very interesting. And given the challenges of these times, we speak resilience certainly as well. I suppose that when you talk to clients, to stakeholders, customer service resilience must be a key concern at the moment.
Yes. It's resilience is being a word that you start to feel sick about it because people talk about it so often. But you know the background is customer. If you run a customer service department, you have been asked to shave about 10 to 15% cost year on year. You may have been using lean methodology for a decade. We have been offshoring and outsourcing our resources, right? So as much as we can, and then we cut. If our outsourcers requesting them to continue to digitalize the service and optimize the cost. So it's typically another 7 to 10% cost savings a year after you have saved the initial money. So all of this start to collapse in front of people's eyes because different geographies have very different capabilities and situation, how the country and people dealt with COVID. So Australia, for example, at the beginning of 2019, almost all the offshore contact centers shut for majority of Australian business. So that refers to India and Manila. And so Philippines. And then some of them come back, but they never come back into the right shape and form and resilience that people are looking for. So what happened is a lot of large Australian companies, they make the decision to bring every single contact center agent back onshore. Just think about the cost difference, right? So they're going to blow their budget in a big way if they do not use technology or digital interactions and self-service to replace human transactions, right? So again, if you want to rate Google, Telstra, service transformation, there's lots of publicly available information on the goals that Telstra set on bringing service teams back into Australia, and as well as reducing.
Is that something that you also see from clients elsewhere in Asia, or is that more of an Australian
you'll see that not only in contact center but also in field service. Originally you can have a field service team in Malaysia and serve the whole region. You can't, right? So the whole optimization have to be really restrained into the country and sometimes into a state. And as such, that then you have to give a lot more transparencies to the field service engineers. And also then resilience also means you add additional resources from your contractors, right? So not necessarily yours, but you start to grab the skills in the market, give them the tool that being able to connect them into your backbone so that if they need to, they can jump on the truck and serve, right? So a lot of change in that aspect. When at Salesforce, we see that firsthand in contact centers and in self-service software deployment and changes, right? So, all of a sudden people would ask for optimization, that rules to be changed, to be restrained into geographical boundaries, right? So, and then a lot more people are looking for a gig economy, mobility solutions. A lot of people are asking for, we call that invisible skills in the society that you otherwise couldn't tap. So COVID did this really leveling the ground of technology environment of people who work for the company or people who are contractors. Also leveling the technology environment of people who have a desk and people who do not have a desk. Indeed. And further leveling the ground of people who are sitting in the headquarters or office tower or working from home. There's 3 or 4 levels of all differences in technologies you use. They all collapse into one to say you have to make people being able to work from anywhere and collaborate from anywhere. And that's a big challenge, but that's also part of the whole resilience play, right? So once they do that, then it's becoming very efficient. Yeah.
But it seems to be more complex than as a user or consumer of the services one would possibly imagine. I wonder what's the qualitative impact of what you seem to describe as almost a repatriation of certain consumer and customer service functions back into certain countries, when you're actually in a multinational that covers a lot of ground and has a regional approach or global approach. Doesn't that have certain consequences?
It does. It's quite interesting, right? So you have multiple forces working into different directions. For example, we are not seeing shrinking of contact centers because more works are done remotely. More works need to be done remotely. More people are shopping online or asking questions on the phone. So there's a global explosion of jobs needs to be done remotely in a work from home contact center or a office contact center. So that's first, right? So that grows. And then secondly, if you design a contact center today, you don't really see you're fitting 300 people, you're fitting like 100 people. so people have to run more spaces because there's not all the industries that customers have a contract with provider allowing the provider to work from home. A lot of banks won't allow it, right? So you cannot make it secure enough or trusting enough in the home environment. People start to loosen it. People start to accept it. But at the same time, the fraud and security threat is going to the roof, right? So every country is experiencing some of the highest contact center fraud or service fraud in the history. So there's multiple angles to force company to say make really smart decisions. A lot of them wait and see, sit there, wait and see, and then they make really quick decisions. But that's the situation we are having today, right? So to say, well, nothing is kind of certain, and but the more they convert people into digital service, the faster they implement changes in their digital service, then the easier they are able to deal with this challenge of constant change.
Yeah. And in that context, we seem to see a digital divide between, if we speak manufacturers, some really prepared preparing also for the future of the industry, and some providing new service offerings, and others that are struggling to meet the expectations that are evolving so quickly throughout COVID and with that push.
Yeah. Every crisis brings pressure on CEOs, CFOs to rationalize their portfolio. Right? So but then the only best companies, turn that around to become the next opportunity. So we start to see stars, right? So really turning around. And also quite interestingly is the customers' expectations on digital adoption is rising significantly. Like before, you kind of take for granted if government tries to ask you to do something, you don't do it because they don't understand how they encourage people to adopt digital channels. Today, people expect government to really become really fit, like a commercial organization, to say, that if there is a change on policy because of travel or COVID situation, I expect this is digital, I expect this works. So that perception over a year, so the first 6 months in 2019, everybody is very skeptical of any apps. Today, everybody is accepting some sort of app or apps, right? So that some sort of government will be putting out, improving. and people is accepting that's part of the life. So consumers in general, citizens and in general have much less tolerance of incompetent, or companies hide behind due to COVID, where our call volume is too high, we can't talk to you, right? So people do not tolerate that anymore. They will churn, they will run away. Yeah.
So not so easy to hide.
No, the hiding days are gone. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we look at international business theory and in the textbook Doing Business in Asia, there are many different cases and examples. We look at the advantages and disadvantages that companies have when they do business in a foreign market. So basically by being foreign. You've been working with mainly non-Asian companies to date. Is there anything that you can see around that being an advantage or a disadvantage? What is called liability of foreigners in the international business literature around doing business in Asia or in other regions of the world to that extent?
There's a glow of reputations and branding, even though it's not always in every segment of the market, right? So if you see software industries, you will see, okay, American companies enjoys a lot of glow on branding for their effort of investing in Asia Pacific market for the past 3 decades, right? So Salesforce included, but also Microsoft, Oracle's, IBM's, right? So they come and they have up and downs, but they generally are very reliable, trustworthy investors, and they don't go disappear for overnight. Like my previous company, like Siemens, right? So very, very trusted in Asia, in the whole Asia Pacific region. Underneath, the most successful companies always put a lot of effort on localization. So they carry the global branding for the globe, but they do a lot of effort for localization, even for the most simplistic and consumer fronting brand like Apple, right? So or most biggest companies in software like Microsoft, if you look at their localization effort, they're really ahead of everybody, right? So they make sure when they sell software or hardware to the world, they really mean selling software, hardware to the world. That's a benchmark that Salesforce is looking at, right? That's how I talk with our people. So as look at Microsoft or Apple, what do they do? Okay, can we do the same? If we can't, then we're just not as good, right? So they just don't talk about it. Yeah, they just don't talk about it. People take it for granted, right? So of course it should work in my local currency and in my taxation policy and in my local environment, but it's not that easy. So so successful companies all do a lot in that space. You look at HR softwares or ERP accounting softwares, right? So same thing, right? So the deeper end or the successful ones are all very much rooted into delivering what locally is required. Yeah.
So if you're thinking about a new business that wants to come into the Asian market, continue with our focus on doing business in Asia here. When it comes to customer experience and market strategy, what are the recommendations that you would make to them in a conversation? What is it that you would, start to talk about?
It starts from a talent war, of course. I judge by looking at the general manager's LinkedIn. And then if I see someone coming to Singapore fresh out of San Francisco camp and have never had an international experience, you start to get a bit suspicious. not saying they're not successful, but you say, okay, this market, if you think it's very important, you should know better. You should find someone who have more grounding in the part of the world to be able to lead it. That's how I judge it when I was a Gartner analyst, and I continue to judge it this way when we do our competitive analysis for Salesforce competitors, right? So we look at people, we look at a lot of people's movement to see who are the pool of talent to run the company, and then you start to immediately know if this is going to be a problem for you or not.
So send the right people into the market so that the market understands you're serious about the venture.
That's right. And then that, because you send the right leader in, then that right leader will hire the right people. And in the in this market, particularly in digital space, software, fintech, digital commerce, there's absolutely a talent shortage in Southeast Asia, right? So there's too many jobs, and not enough people, and people hasn't turned away from that glory of I need to be in Silicon Valley to make it. So the first batch of thinking of that has changed. A lot of tech investors, venture capitals, and then they look at starting from digital commerce space. Then it moved to that these days will move into cloud-based infrastructure, right? So infrastructure as a service space. And then software is the third one to move, right? So they would see in the next couple of years, I think a lot of great opportunities of jobs in Asia Pacific because of that. Yeah. And then you'll say, okay, I've got the right leader. People keep asking me about what does it mean by having a good competitive strategy, right? So I just focus on that, right? So, and then I said, well, there's a few things, right? So which is quite obvious, but we don't do it. And I said, well, the competitive strategies, really you need to focus on how to win. Right? So when you focus on how to win, you are actually focusing on your strengths. So it's like swimming competition. You're not too worried about the next bloke next to you who has longer legs, right? So all you know is like you pedal faster and then you try best and then you deliver. So that's the dilemma of competitive strategy, right? So you can look a lot about competitors, what they do. But more importantly is to understand the enemy so that you understand your strengths. And that's where you focus on strengths. And you do not have to be strong in every aspect, but you just need to be that strong a little bit than your competitor for you to win. So so the combination of the strengths will become a winning factor, and that's what you should be focused. So that's the first angle about competitive strategy. Second angle is strategy is always about choices. So you ask a 5-year-old kid, says, hey, Bob, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be the mailman or do you want to be a school bus driver? And then Bob says, I want to be the school bus driver. He's so cool, right? So that's choices. In large companies, what you see is a lot of people are having strategy in their job title. But very, very few people have the ability to give recommendations on choices to say, well, if you want to be the bus driver, this is how you become a bus driver. This is how much money you want to invest to become a bus driver. These are the DNAs that you need to know. You're a good driver, and then you enjoy driving it, or you are a mailman, right? So those choices, I think most people after graduating from MBA goes into a company a few years, they all forget about the strategy 101 class and then buried into analytics of data and then just miss the last hit, right? So of what are the choices that companies have. Yeah.
Any other recommendations that you would like to provide our viewers with around specifically doing business in Asia?
I would emphasize on speed. They have been, if you are, working for a large corporations, it's always about scope, which means we want to do the right things. These days, speed is more important than scope. You will do 80% right, faster.
So faster than the
Even
competition
faster.
is what you're saying?
Yes, and then faster to deal with the uncertainty because of the market condition. COVID is not giving anybody an easy job. So anything you can do to make your move faster, invest in that, right? So I would do that.
Given the diversity of the region, how do you actually do that?
There's management systems that how you collapse your systems so that it's becoming less hierarchical. You have wing rooms. I don't like the word of win or war, right? So, but you have a mechanism that is actually do not have to be a synchronized way in a remote environment, but asynchronized way, but where people can talk, discuss, make decisions. You need your technological backbone that goes really remove legacies when you can, right? So if you have a system that just stops you from moving ahead, just have to replace it. Make sure you do that investment when you can. Otherwise, it just drags you down. The long-term economical impact or business impact is just too great, right? It's too great, and then we all regret that. It's like really when the car breaks down on the road, I said, why I still have that car? Right? So it's just shouldn't have done that, should have traded it in, right? So why do I have to keep that for another year? So that's when people really regret, right? So, and these are really the recommendations I would give.
That's interesting what you're saying there about asynchronous, maybe polysynchronous ways of communicating and making those decisions quickly, and having the right systems for that seems to be a really interesting proposition across this big region and the diversity
that's
of it.
Right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Olive Huang, thank you so much for the insights. Very much appreciated.
All right. Welcome.